For the third time in 2 years, France is being forced to withdraw its troops from a West African country. First from Mali, then Burkina Faso, and now Niger. These three countries face jihadist insurgencies, which the French were there to help suppress. But all three have since had military takeovers, which the former colonial power has opposed. The three West African countries have since announced a new security pact to tackle the jihadist attacks. Thousands of people continue to flee the violence, though, as DW found from a village in Niger near the border with Mali.
An uncertain new life at the IDP camp in Zakoura. Abdul Razak Soumana fled his home village after seeing Islamist terrorists kill his neighbors. He managed to escape with his family at the last minute.
We have suffered so much because of the terrorists. We were forced to leave our village. The terrorists warned us, but we didn't believe them at first. Then one day they came and burned all of our grain storage, took away our livestock and destroyed all of our possessions. And that was the day we fled to the Tillaberi region.
Having lost their animals and with no land to cultivate, the refugees are in a dire situation here. The local government has given them a place to put their makeshift huts, but nothing more. The women try to earn some money weaving straw mats.
We go to the weekly local markets and try and sell our mats there, so that we can buy at least some necessities to feed the family.
The Zakoura community has taken in more than 3,000 refugees. At first, the locals welcomed them, but then conflicts over land and water started. That's why the mayor is pinning her hope on the new military government. She expects the junta to get the security crisis under control so that the IDPs can finally return.
The last few days have been really good. The army has moved in to secure the area. In fact, the IDPs themselves want to go back to their villages. But what they really need first is psychological support.
Many IDPs are traumatized, but the daily struggle for survival overrides everything. Water is the biggest problem. Every drop has to be paid for at the local pump. Too often, come evening, there is no water left. But today, Hamza Abdul Wahab is lucky he managed to fill his canister for a price he can afford.
The demand for water is huge. People come here all day long. For the displaced people who come to get water from the pump, we sometimes sell it to them at a lower price, lower than for the locals, because we know that they don't have enough money.
Seni Al-Fazazi is the camp elder. He tries to spread confidence in the community and to calm tempers if conflicts with the locals over water arise. For him, hope has now returned.
Since the day we learnt that the military had taken power, we've had high hopes that we'll be able to return to our respective villages. We've already heard that the military are doing their best in our localities to drive the terrorists out.
There's optimism in the town hall too. The newly announced defense alliance between Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger is inspiring more confidence than the old cooperation with France.
We have no other partners than this alliance. We welcomed it very, very favorably. We hope it supports the authorities. Above all, we welcome this partnership because it could help curb or eradicate terrorism.
But until that happens, the IDPs will have to stay and live in the camp.
Let's speak now to Dr. Kabir Adamu, who's a security analyst and the managing director of Beacon Consulting, which is a security risk management solutions provider in Nigeria and in the Sahel. Welcome to DW News Africa. Thanks for joining us from Abuja. Now, looking at this security cooperation between Niger, Mali and Burkina Faso, is this about their war against terrorism, or is this predominantly against ECOWAS, which opposed their respective military coups?
Thank you, Tomi. It's a combination of both and additional security challenges that the three countries are facing. The immediate challenge, especially for Niger, is the threat of a military action to restore civil rule, as it were, liberal democracy in that country. You would recall that since July 26th, when a junta took over power there, ECOWAS has been consistent that it would not preclude the possibility of a military action. And since then, Niger has attempted to reach out to neighboring countries, including Burkina Faso and Mali, to come to its aid, as it were. And we've seen, even in practical terms, deployment of military assets from Mali and Burkina Faso to Niger. So this is, for me, a culmination of that discussion or conversation between the three neighboring countries. On the other hand, they both individually and collectively face threats from non-state armed groups, some of them ideological, and others just criminal groups that are quite pervasive within the Sahel region. And so in the case of Mali, as an example, the threat from these groups have led to two military interventions. And so when they speak against these threats, it is an existential challenge to their governments, as it were, and then, of course, to their countries. So it's a combination of these factors and several other factors that have forced this partnership, as it were, between them.
Another fractured relationship is Niger's relationship with France, which has confirmed to withdraw its troops after such a long time, and also following pressure from Niger. If we look back at France's military mission, can this be described as a failure overall? Because we're there for around a decade and the Islamist threat is still there.
So, it depends on how you look at it. I wouldn't describe it as a complete failure. When France came in particular in Mali, its primary objective then was to prevent the complete takeover of Malian territory by these non-state armed groups. And I think it was largely successful in preventing the spread of the then threat element, and to even recover lost territory, and supported the Malian government in reinstating its authority in those lost parts of Mali that were taken over by these non-state armed groups. However, I think the challenge for France has been how to translate those kind of successes to the ordinary and average, resident of countries in the Sahel. And I think it's because of the way the intervention is framed. France is a foreign partner. In no way should France take up the responsibility for providing what a national government should provide. In most countries, the primary responsibility of government is the provision of security. So when that responsibility is shifted to a foreign partner, I think it's just clear that it's not what a foreign partner can do. And perhaps that is a failure in the conception of French post-colonial diplomacy. And of course, the resultant effect is this animosity that is geared or directed at France. Right. So failures in some instances, but then I think overall I wouldn't describe it as a total failure.
So where does this all leave Niger? Because it still has to fight to maintain security and to combat the Islamist insurgency.
So that's, I think, the greatest worry at the moment. And I'm quite worried that the international community, starting from ECOWAS, to AU, and of course even the UN, and then of course other superpowers, are not really speaking enough around that. I think arguably the Sahel region remains at the forefront of current security challenges affecting the world. And if we don't move carefully, we could see a reenactment of the Afghanistan scenario in the Sahel. There are a couple of countries at the moment that the authority of the state is so shaky that at any moment in time, these non-state armed groups could take control of a significant portion of the territory and go ahead to declare some form of territorial control over those locations. So it is worrisome. In the case of Niger, the focus at the moment is to exit France, and I think they've largely succeeded in doing that. What we haven't seen or heard is what strategy are they going to put in place to replace the vacuum that would be created by the exit of France. It's easy to say, for instance, that the US will fill that vacuum, but we haven't had that type of narrative or language coming out of the US. The US is very specific. It has two military formation sites in Niger, and just not too long ago, it actually moved one to merge it with the other. So it's not very likely that we would see some ground operations of the type that was done by France, by the US in Niger. So a vacuum will be created, and at the moment, the only benefactor of that vacuum are these non-state armed groups. We've seen Niger reduce its participation in the G5 that is as good as dead at the moment. Mali is no longer active in that force. In the multinational joint task force in Chad, Niger has also reduced its participation. In all of these instances, the only benefactor has been these non-state armed groups, the ideological ones, and the several others that are operating in the region. So if that continues, again, the possibility of a reenactment of an Afghanistan-like scenario is extremely high.
Okay. Dr. Kabir Adamu, thank you very much for speaking to us.